The show, this show is all about you. Not you, but you and your stories. Because everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Brought to you by JeffSeltzer.com.
Hello and welcome to Everybody Has a Story with Jeff Seltzer. I'm your host, Jeff Seltzer, and welcome to my own personal midlife crisis. This is episode 74 on the journey that we're taking to learn more about both myself as well as those around me as well. I've had lots of great guests recently. Got a lot of great feedback about last week's guest, referee DM Stevens. It was awesome to finally record with him a full podcast. Definitely gotten a lot of great feedback about it. So thank you all for those who have reached out about it. Before introducing my guest for this week, I did want to chat a little bit about movies. So as most of you know, I do love movies. I do document what movies that I see. And in 2026, I am on pace to break my personal record for the most movies watched in a year. Through early July, I think I've seen 80 different movies so far. It's a combination of in theaters and at home. I think the last time I talked movies, I talked about my obsession for Obsession. Like, the movie was fantastic, loved it. Great movie. Really, I think it's one of my favorite movies of the year so far. And also the fact that I think Back Room should have probably been kept in the back room because I really didn't enjoy it that much. Friends of mine have said it was like super scary and they loved it. It did absolutely nothing for me, just gave me a headache. So since then, I've seen, it looks like about 14 movies. So briefly wanted to kind of fly through them before talking about the topic for this week. So a few movies that I saw at home. I saw Faces of Death. Wasn't in theaters very long, and then I saw it home at streaming. It was okay. Didn't love it, didn't hate it. It kind of existed. I did see Dirty Work, another one of my favorites. Norm Macdonald, one of my all-time favorite comedians and actors who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. Great movie, and I've been recently watching The Norm Show, which is now on streaming. Great one as well. Recently added to Disney Plus is Hoppers. Really feels like an animated Avatar, although Avatar is kind of animated, so I don't know what you'd want to call about it. It wasn't good. People talk about and say, like, hey, why do they keep making Toy Story 5 and Incredibles 17 and whatever else like that? Why don't they make original movies? Well, when they make original movies like Hoppers, nobody sees it and people don't tend to like it, I guess. So that's probably why they go back to the well and invest in what's worked in the past. So Hoppers wasn't very good, I didn't think. With that said, I did see in theaters Toy Story 5 and absolutely loved it. Definitely a great movie. Watch it with kids, watch it by yourself. I mean, Toy Story 1 came out, I want to say 30 or 30 plus years ago. And if you have any nostalgia for the first one and you've watched parts 2 and 3, maybe skip part 4. Part 5 was fantastic. Absolutely loved it. I also recently saw on HBO Max How to Make a Killing. I would say it was a good premise, fun movie, but the ending kind of fell flat. You could probably stay away from that one. Also on Disney Plus, Punisher: One Last Kill. Based on and includes the Punisher from the old Netflix series and now in the Daredevil series. John Barenthal, who was in Walking Dead, he's done a bunch of other stuff as well. Really enjoyed it. It was like 45 minutes long, but it was just fantastic. A lot of fun to watch and such. Other movies, real quick, that I've seen, Masters of the Universe. Those of you that grew up in the 80s, like I did, really fun movie. Definitely brings back the feels from when you were a kid watching the cartoon, playing with the He-Man figures. Disclosure Day, you could probably skip that one. Not good at all, in my opinion. Supergirl. So I went in with very low expectations, but it blew me away. I mean, maybe it was because I didn't really think I was going to like it, and I really liked it. Or the fact that Superman that came out last summer, I didn't enjoy that either, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun story. I loved the fact that they kind of made her kind of like a bit of a badass. It was just fun. And I'd like to see where it goes in the future. I know it didn't do that well in the box office, but I hope they have, more hope for it in the future. As it was fun. I'd love to see more of that. Last movie that I saw in theaters recently was Jackass, Best and Last. As a male, late 40s. I'm not saying I grew up with it, but like right out of college, I watched a lot of the Jackass TV series and movies. It's just dumb fun. Really great. Makes you laugh pretty hard, and it's just ridiculous. So if you're looking for some dumb, stupid comedy, definitely the new Jackass movie is fun. 4 movies that I thought were super interesting that I wanted to bring up before moving on here. So in 2002, I enjoyed the movie Cabin Fever. Really great horror movie from Eli Roth. I thought it was really well written, it was just fun overall and just very different. I rewatched that recently, and as I was watching it, I found they actually did a reboot or a remake of it also written by Eli Roth, that came out in 2016, also called Cabin Fever. So I was curious, so I watched it for the first time, only to find out that it was exactly the same script, but it's not as well put together. So you could probably avoid the reboot of Cabin Fever. Additionally, I recently watched Hellraiser, the first movie from 1997, the horror movie, because it's going to be in Halloween Horror Nights in September in Universal Orlando. So I like to do some homework to prepare myself for the houses. I had actually never seen it before. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. It was a great campy 87 horror movie. And then in 2022, straight to Hulu, they made a remake of the first Hellraiser movie, um, also very skippable. So I think the lesson here is a lot of times, sometimes movies made the first time are great, and then when they try to remake it, it just doesn't land as well as it should have. So I don't know. Have you seen any movies recently? If so, shoot me a note on Instagram. You could DM me at Everybody Has a Story Pod. You can find the show on YouTube at Everybody Has a Story Pod. You can email the show directly at everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. For all things Jeff Seltzer, you can always check me out at jeffseltzer.com. For some fun stuff, check out everybodyhasastorypod.com. As a reminder, we're on all podcast platforms, video on Spotify and YouTube. We are also on audio, Spotify and YouTube, as well as Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Pandora. As of last week, as I mentioned, we're also on Pocket Casts now. So if you could take a look at that app, maybe download the app, listen to a few episodes that way, give it a 5-star review so we can kind of, build up the algorithm. On all podcast platforms, if you could follow, rate, review, comment, all the fun stuff, that would be great. Hopefully we can find some new listeners that way. With that said, I did want to introduce my guest for this week, friend of the show, Natalie Dean. Natalie, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me. So happy to be here.
Of course. Well, thank you for coming. Thank you for making time to share your story with everyone. As once we get into it, we'll learn a little bit more about your experiences, kind of the life that you live, and just things that you've experienced and things that, like, I don't know, things that I'm very curious to learn about. So before we get
Yeah.
into that, if you could give us a little spiel about who is Natalie Dean.
I am a single boy mom of one, and I'm very proud. My son is going to be 5 in August, so right around the corner, and he is just the love of my life, light of my life. And I have, over the past 3 years, spent a lot of time resetting my own personal life and realigning myself after post divorce. And with that experience, there have been major ups and downs, and all around, I like to say as well, not just ups and downs, but around too.
I'm sure.
And just realigning myself, which comes with, learning who I really am at this point in my life. I'm 38 years old, so pushing 40 soon. And there are so many things that I've learned through this process of like who I am now in my 30s compared to who I was at the beginning of the relationship or even in my 20s. So lots of, different evolvements that have occurred over the past few years. And I'm just happy to be here to share any insights or any kind of wisdom I can offer anyone going through this transformation, I like to call it, in a positive, to put a positive spin on it.
Awesome. Well, again, first of all, thank you again for joining. Really appreciate it. And again, I'd like to learn through your experiences and kind of see like what you're going through. In addition, I mean, it's probably a very common evergreen story in the fact that, what do they say, over 50% of marriages end in divorce, right? So most marriages end in divorce. Most marriages have kids of some kind. So that means that for the most part, like this is a story that you're experiencing, that it's not just n equals one, right? There's a lot of people who are experiencing similar things, but don't necessarily, I guess, like understand your experience or know what to expect. But I'm sure there's lots of different ways to experience what's going on and figuring out what's best for themselves. So hearing your story and hearing how you've kind of gone through it, I think would be interesting to a lot of people out there.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I learned like right off the bat, or kind of went through, I should say, is the fear of, well, first of all, there's so much going on when, during post breakup or separation, your entire life has just been rocked. You're going from living with, multiple people in the house, including your partner, your children, or child, and going to having to live again on your own it can be really scary, actually. There's a really big change that comes with that. And I think that one of the first things that I learned was, like accepting like fear of judgment right away, not only from others but also like from within, from myself. You can't help but feel like a little disappointed that whether or not the relationship was it doesn't have to be necessarily like this traumatic, like terrible thing that's in turmoil. Like if two people just are not making the best decisions while they're together in the presence of their child, like that means like it's just time to do the right thing and to split apart. So it doesn't always have to be this devastating kind of like traumatic episode that happens. Like there are some people who like have breakups that are just very mutual. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, to your point, whatever, like change is tough. Change is different and change affects everybody in different ways. Change involving multiple people has to be like not much more weird, I guess, too, because it's not just how it impacts you, but it's how it impacts them, and then how you and them's change kind of impacts each other, right? And especially when you throw in a young child who's still obviously developing and going through things, it's not just about how you feel or your ex feels. It's all about trying to make the most for your child, right? And make sure your child has the most quote like I guess normal childhood and developmentally and stuff like that, right? That's got to be top of mind and very I guess complicated in terms of trying to make sure everything lands as best as possible.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what should always come first, is the children, in my opinion. I mean, but with that being said, we also have to be graceful and give ourselves, lots of positive affirmations when going through this, because like I said before, the fear of judgment from others, like I failed this something that was supposed to be everlasting, came to a stop for whatever reason that was.
Of
So I
course.
think the first thing is just acceptance, which can take a while. Like, they talk about the different, I mean, you're grieving, you're going through the different stages of grief in this process.
Right.
Very much like you're mourning a death, to be
Of course.
honest with you. That was my personal, that's kind of the stages that like I felt this personally. And I think that you're going to have to do a lot of being prepared for a lot of people from not only, like friends and outsiders, but even your own family, your number ones, they're going to be a little, I don't want to say that, I think most families try to be as supportive as they can, but support looks very different, right?
Yeah, of course.
Sometimes.
Yeah, of course. And I was going to ask also, so like obviously going through a divorce is tough, and obviously having a child during that time is tough as well. What resources did you have or did you use? Like, did you have like a good group of friends that you kind of like utilized? Did you have therapy? Did you do a lot of research and reading? Kind of like what was your process, your thought process in terms of getting to where you want to get to?
That's a really great question. And you bring up a really great point. Like, when you are going through this, you have to make sure that like you have a strong foundation of support. And I did, the girlfriend, I had a group of girlfriends, believe it or not, like 50% of them, like you said, 50% of people end up in divorce. Like
Right.
50% were going through their own divorces at the time
Right.
or had been through. So as much as that was helpful, I have to say to anyone out there, like be a little wary of like also how much like I guess energy and information you are sharing, and be mindful, because it's really easy to almost kind of be stuck in this loop with another person who's going through it if it's constantly bringing up like kind of negative, bringing up like the negative experiences going through it with your ex, and like bringing that up to friends who are also going through that. I actually find that that's not always at least for me speaking. I felt like, when you're talking about the same thing, like I don't know, you end up kind of talking about like being hooked a little bit on like the negatives, if you will, more than the positives. And you keep each other a little bit stuck in that situation, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And I'll say for me, like I try to be a strong ally no matter what I do. So um, not necessarily recently, and I won't get the details about it, but I have a friend who at some point went through divorce or was in the process of doing it. So I wanted to understand how to best support this friend. Like, should I be like all in and try to like talk and whatever, or should I give the person space, or kind of like what does that look like? So I had a coworker or have a coworker that I'm friends with, and I reached out to her and was like, hey, um, she had been divorced a few years ago, and I understood like obviously what she went through. So I asked her, I said, hey, when you were going through that split, like what did support look like to you? Like what were you hoping for, looking for from your friends or from your family? And like what would make you feel, I guess, like as loved as possible? So it was a great conversation. And her basically the premise at the end was, you know, try to understand and listen to the person. Obviously, support looks different in all ways.
Yeah.
Read the room. They may need some space at first. Eventually, they may want to talk. Don't make them talk before they want to. Things like that. So again, just kind of kept going back to my friend to get a sense of what other things I could do that would have helped her at the time, and then went back to my friend who was going through the split at the time, and tried to use those lessons and emulate those lessons so that way the person can not feel overwhelmed, but at the same time understand that I'm there if they need me, but at the same time taking a step back if they just want their space.
Right, absolutely. I think that those were such great words of wisdom and what great advice. I mean, I would totally agree with everything that your friend shared with you. The first of all being that you do need space a little bit when you're going through this. This can be your whole life has just been changed, and everything is changing all at once, which can sometimes feel very confusing, and it can be very exhausting, especially if you're trying to not only raise your child at the same time, but you're trying to balance work on top of it. That's why for many people who have gone through this that I've spoken to, balancing, especially going to work every day and having to like deal with your work work life, and then having to balance that with coming home and then dealing with this, like, it can be a lot. It can be really overwhelming to the point where, unfortunately, at one point I myself did experience some brain fog, and it was just too much. So to have to constantly like have friends, even though if they came from a good angle and they wanted to check in, and their where they were coming from was good, having to like explain yourself of the details of what's going on, that can be just a lot.
Right. Absolutely. So, as part of the grieving process, obviously through the split, and obviously I was raising a child and co-parenting at the same time, have you had more time to yourself? So, is it like a custody thing? Do you have 100%? Like, if you don't mind me asking, like, what does that look like?
Sure. So we have a parenting plan. That's what most people have, when going through custody, that, it splits up like the time between two homes. I mean, what's really nice actually about that, Jeff, is that like everything is covered. Okay. So everything from the holidays to vacation time. So there is no gray area. And that's really important because that's when, conflict can,
Of
it's
course.
easier for conflict to arise, of course. So, I think having that laid out with your co-parent is one of the best things that you can do. That's going to set you both up for success and not give that like window of opportunity to kind of like get into something that could snowball into something bigger. So every ground is kind of covered, if you will. And then, I guess when you're not with your child, like for me, for instance, I have also learned that, kind of jumping back to what we were saying about like, going to certain friends, and how do you find your, I guess, your foundation for like recovery or resetting from this, making sure that you do have that strong foundation of support. For me personally, it's not so much talking to people I have personal ties with. It's actually going in and like going to a group of other co-parents who are going through a similar situation, or having my therapist, or again, just doing as much, I guess, like inner work as I can possible.
Right.
And that can look very different for a lot of people.
Of course. And getting back to the co-parenting plan as well. I mean, that obviously takes a lot
Yeah.
of maturity on both sides, right? Making sure that both sides, have the best interests, in mind, are following it, and there's no last minute like, oh no, this, that, and whatever. Like making sure you're on the same page. So that way, if you, let's say are without your child for the weekend and you make plans, the kid's not all of a sudden dumped on you at that point, because that's, the opposite of what you're trying to do with this. So my follow-up question was going to be, so on weekends or times, whatever, that you are without the child, do you have like routines that you've tried to put in to kind of like keep yourself busy? Because I'd imagine like if you're just staring at the clock all weekend waiting for your child to come back home, that could just be completely just mind numbing.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I haven't still fully mastered it. I'm still
Of
kind
course,
of trying
it's a journey. I get that.
it's totally a journey, but
Yeah.
that's a really good point that you bring up, because honestly, in the very beginning, it is the one of the most like heartbreaking feelings to have to like say goodbye to your child. And even though you know that they're going to be safe and they're going to be, with the other parent, it's still that's your baby,
Sure.
and no matter what age. And some people have shared with me, don't worry, it gets easier over time. But I don't know if that's necessarily true, like
Yeah.
it is hard. And I think it's okay to say like, it's hard and I'm hurting and I miss my child right now. But one thing that my therapist has worked on with me is not only just to keep myself busy, but like how to kind of help cope with that feeling of grieving while your child is not with you is actually setting up things in like the child's room that needs to be done for their next visit, for example, to
Right.
help so it's not, you're not focusing on the loss that your child is not with you during that time. You're kind of working towards like something that is productive for when they're next with you. So you're looking more future oriented than you are staying
Yep.
kind of in this like sad place, because trust me, it's easy to get stuck there. And for me personally, like even to this day, sometimes when I get stuck with my thoughts, if I don't have anything that is like, like I said, like looking at the planning for the future, I can just easily kind of spiral like in my own mind sometimes. And it can take hours to come back from sometimes it feels.
Of course, totally get that. And this isn't going to be the same or even the same level or whatever. But like for me, my I guess my almost point of comparison was a number of years ago when I got laid off from my job, and so all of a sudden I have a lot of free time that I didn't have before. So for me, and I think I talked about it with Joanna Rodriguez a few months ago when I talked to her, was the best thing that for me, at least me personally, was to find routines because I can stay at home and I could stare at the wall all day and kind of feel bad for myself and try to find jobs, but whatever. But like I found that like when I got into routines where I'd go to the gym every day, I would, maybe I go to the movies. I would look for jobs for 2 hours a day. Something that kind of kept me in a routine of sorts helped me at least get through that time until I found my next job. Because otherwise, you can one week could become 3 weeks, could become like 3 months, and before you know it, you're just kind of a vegetable staring at the wall.
Oh, 100%. And I did go through that. And I think that, people need to be a little bit, again, you have to give yourself some grace. This is going to be a a little bit of a traumatic experience to a degree where like it's going to be confusing. You're going to have that brain fog like I experienced that I went
Yep.
through. That's very normal. So I think sometimes we don't give ourselves enough time to process as well. Like we are always just trying to stay busy and do something. So it's very, it's a really hard thing to do. And I'm still in the process of mastering it myself. And I'm not perfect at it. But it's finding a balance between staying busy, but not staying pointless busy, if that makes sense.
Of course. So with I guess the downtime in terms of whatever the split ends up being, have you found new hobbies or new things to kind of keep you occupied during these times?
Yeah, so I'm in the process of building my social media platform. So what I like to do, what I have been doing is I've been building like a little community for myself called like my soul tribe. And it's just, I'm really into like astrology and some kind of intuitive stuff, if you will. So I've just been connecting with like-minded people, and what I've been finding is really been helpful is going on these like Instagram lives actually, where the people that I follow on Instagram, like they're doing like a free, they're giving out like one to as many people as they can, like free advice or, kind of meditative guided sessions, if you will. So that's been actually pretty cool and pretty
Awesome.
fun. Yeah.
Awesome. So you'll have time at the end also, but do you want to, at this point, since you started talking about it, drop any of your social media platforms if people want to follow you or kind of look for you?
Oh, sure. That would be great. So you can find me on Instagram. That's really the only platform I'm using primarily right now. But my handle is at eyeliner and insights. So all one word, eyeliner and insights. And I like to, on my platform, keep it as positive as I can, but like I like to give a good mix of like some true life insights. So mixed with some funny memes. I love my memes. I could be setting those like all day. So you have to be careful with that too. Like that can get a little too out of hand
Of course.
sometimes. And then with the mix, I'm a huge like music is everything to me. Music has been one of the most like healing remedies I have found through this journey. And so I try to keep it a nice light balance.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to say, like, for me personally, from a therapy perspective, I don't see a therapist anymore, but I do have lots of different things and routines and like tools that I utilize to get myself through certain things. Like, one of them is definitely music. There's certain albums or certain artists that, like, when I'm feeling in a certain mood, I'll listen to, and it either calms me down or kind of gets me to a certain place. Like, I'll say one of the first ones that I found years ago, like Michelle Branch, The Spirit Room, her first big album. Years ago, like whenever I was going through something, I would play it, and it right away just calm me down. And it's timely also because I think the 25th anniversary of that album's dropping soon, and she's got something special hitting this week. So I'm really, really excited about that. So it's like one of those artists, one of those albums that like I can listen to and repeat, and it just kind of hits me every time. Like, do you have music that you listen to from a therapeutic perspective? Do you have other kind of like tools or methods that you utilize?
Mhm. So I actually, one of the therapies that I used to engage with a couple years ago, is hypnotherapy, believe it
Okay,
or not. And it's not like what people typically think, where like there's like this like, strange guy with glasses being like, follow the pen and you'll fall asleep.
right.
It's much more like self-guided, So it's more so like getting you to a meditative state more than anything, to a good flow state. So you're allowing like your, I guess, your energy and your mind to just be in the present, which for me has been always just like a challenge. I'm always about staying busy to distract myself. And I learned that like the minute that like I would slow down or had to slow down, that's when everything would just like bam, hit me at once,
Right.
And because it's gonna catch up with you. Like you can't run for too long. You're gonna have to face your fears, face the situation head on at some point. So hypnotherapy was really helpful. I've got my therapist. She's been such an excellent support system for me. And, there's still this, little bit of shame, I think, when you're going through this that, oh, I see a therapist, it's not everyone is, so comfortable with that concept, even to this day,
Of
right?
course. Yeah. Yeah, I
But
mean, I was gonna say to that point, sure, it's not 100% there. There's definitely people that I know of who would just kind of roll their eyes if they heard about it. But mental health is obviously a lot more top of mind and a lot more, let's say, accepted than it was 30 years ago. Like when I was in high school, if somebody went to a therapist or if I said I was going, whatever, there definitely would have been a stigma attached to it. I think in 2026, I love kind of the evolution that we as a society have gone to, where it's very normal to go to a therapist, and I like that, and the fact that like the more people talk about it, people can talk through their problems, and even beyond that, just even if you unofficially go to therapy and just talk to people, recognizing that like what you're going through is not abnormal. Like you're a lot of what you're going through, not you personally, but just in general, people around go through it as well. But because people weren't communicating before, nobody knew. Like everybody thought it was, just kind of like what they were going through, whatever else like that. So I think society's gotten better. I don't think we're completely there yet. I'm curious to see what in 10, 15, 20 years it looks like, to see if it truly is like as mainstream as it can be. But it's definitely taking huge strides over the last like 30 years.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there's something so nice to having your one person who is there primarily to help you get through that specific situation. Like I said, for me personally, sharing my story and sharing my situation when I was in the moment with certain girlfriends, that was hard. That
Yes.
can also kind of sway the friendship a little bit, unfortunately. And
Of
that's
course.
not like because the friend is unsupportive. It's just sometimes really hard for people to be dealing with their own life situations to also take on, what's going on in someone else's personal life. And that can also trigger a lot of people too, you
Yeah.
know?
I mean, what I find also, and again, I think this is just more just the way that people process situations, is a lot of people can't necessarily like empathize or feel for a situation until they've experienced it. So, as an example, I would imagine, and I'm completely making this up, but like work with Manis,
Yeah.
if you were talking to a friend of yours who, let's say, isn't divorced, and you're kind of talking about your situation, they may have one thought, but then if at some point they get divorced and they experience it, it all of a sudden hits them very differently, and they're like, "Oh wait, now I get what Natalie went through, and now I understand all of that." Largely because people just have trouble, I think, processing things they don't know about. You know what I mean?
Oh, 100%. And I think another, a very common thing that people experience that we don't really talk about enough is the grieving and a divorce of not just, your ex, but also of friends, of mutual friends.
Sure.
That and family, right? So that comes with it too. So that can be a real, like you're getting, that's a lot of loss at once for one person.
It absolutely is, but I'd imagine it has to be weird too, especially if you're married and have a kid, because even though, let's say, the divorce happens and like in-laws in theory, aren't necessarily in your life, but they still kind of are because they're still the grandparents, the uncle and aunt, the cousins of your child. And obviously that's something that you still need to and want to be aware of. So it's a very weird, like spider web of connections that like, if you didn't have a kid, you'd probably have a clean break from most of that family. But because of the child, they're in your life for at least the next 18 to 20 years.
Exactly. And not just that, but I think, you have to also be very mindful in these situations of, again, like your children, they are sponges. Like, I mean, they soak up everything. Even if you're not speaking words, if you are being passive aggressive in a social situation where you have to run into that mother-in-law that you're not necessarily excited about being, like, the children can always sense that tension and energy, and just being really mindful about that, because that is unfair to also be as hard as it is. And I know it's hard for some of us to hold back those emotions because they could be natural or their responses. You have to think like this is also their grandparent, and this is their time with them as well. And if they're seeing, like mom be really like kind of like, more tense and more upset, like they're gonna put two and two together, and that's gonna put them in a pretty unfair, uncomfortable situation.
Of course. And I mean, it sounds like, and again, I could be wrong, but it sounds like between you and your ex, you've got a fairly mature ish perspective from the breakup. I mean, I've seen lots of stories and read lots of things or whatever about people who, like, let's say badmouth and write comments like about their ex, like with the kid around, which I would imagine is probably one of the worst things that you can do, because obviously the kid's like, oh, that's my dad, the person's talking about. Like, how should I feel about it? And all of a sudden it starts pitting like the kid against one parent or the other, which that's just a very, that's just an endless downhill struggle at that point, I'd imagine.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's one of the like worst things that you could possibly do.
Right.
It's that would it's devastating to a child. They're also feeling the loss. Maybe they can't express it like an adult can, but I mean, they're also feeling that family dynamic be interrupted.
Of course.
You
And
know.
but and I'd imagine, and again, obviously I'm not a therapist, I'm just kind of like looking at the situation. But like depending upon at what age the kid is when the parents split up, like it probably means something different, right? Like your child, you said, is about to turn 5 or is 5. So when this happened, the child was very young and still developing. So for them, like this, from a memory perspective, will probably be like normal, right? Versus like if, let's say, parents split up when the kids are teenagers or 10, 12, 15 years old or whatever, like they remember life before the parents split. So as they get older, like it's a whole processing thing. So I'd imagine in terms of working with the kids and helping them to understand like what they're going through, it's completely different conversations, because for all intents and purposes, and again, I have no idea, but 10 years from now, your child will probably have little to no memory of you and your ex together.
Right, exactly. So I'm, in a way, like with my situation, I am fortunate and I am grateful for that, because honestly, I can't imagine, if he had when we were together, of course, like, he had his own bedroom and it was like that normal kind of family white picket fence dynamic. However, like, he's not going to have to like remember like giving that up. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, this is his new normal. When he's at his father's, he's got his bedroom there, and he has his stuff at his dad's. And then when he's with mom, he has his own stuff here. This is just his new normal. And
Right.
I feel for parents who have, children who are like closer to like, 8 or 9, or like, teenagers, it's really hard. It's really tricky. So I think you have to, as a parent, you are the parent. You have to remember that. Like, I know that it's really hard some days to like get through, but you have to remember like you are the parent, you know.
Absolutely. So another question, and again, feel free to share or not share on this, whatever.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine that I talked about earlier, who got divorced a while ago and has a child, I'm not gonna say how old the kid is, but she, at some point she started dating again. She waited, I want to say about a year or so before she ever introduced her son to her significant other at that point. Which that's got to be a weird thing, I would imagine, in terms of, if the kid is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever years old or whatever, and them understanding like, okay, so mom is not with dad anymore, but mom is friends with this person instead. Is there anything that you would want to or could share about any experiences or your mindset and all that or anything?
Yeah, so I think that taking a year off, like, to until you introduce that partner to your child is one of the wisest things you could do. You do not want to be, introducing people that are kind of like a revolving door, if you will, like in and out. Like that could be very disruptive and
Right.
very confusing for the child. Um, because some children do get attached to these new friends, right?
Of
and
course.
and that's another loss if that relationship doesn't work out to them, and it's confusing. So personally, I'm not even dating. I'm not on the apps. They kind of scare me a little bit. I mean, I think that you have to really give yourself a lot of grace and some time here to really just like be, if you're not in good alignment and you're not centered, you're not going to necessarily be attracting someone with like similar type of ethics, morals. I'm a big believer in that. So I think that it's really important to, like what your friend did, take that time and wait until they knew that it was something concrete and sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'd imagine it's very confusing trying to explain to the kid, like, who is this person? Like, is this mommy's friend? Is this mommy's boyfriend? Like, what does that mean in comparison to dad? Like, all those kinds of things. So I guess just being cautious and just making sure that it's serious-ish before making that introduction.
Right, absolutely. And I think, that also goes with, I'm back with living with my folks, and I've just taken this time to save up and to reset so I can be in a position where I move out. So with that being said, if someone is dating someone, it's like, what if they start to live with that person in their house? I mean, that person then is kind of like the primary, I
Of
guess,
course.
giver or head of the household. So that could also be definitely influential to like the child as well, bringing them into someone else's domain.
Absolutely. I guess question I would have then, I guess, even beyond that is, so I would imagine, like, since you're split, or post your break, like, you've probably known of or seen people who have split up. Like, have you proactively gone to them to help them with advice? Like, what's been your approach to people like that?
I have had like some of the most amazing, beautiful connections this past year, connecting to a lot of different women and men who are going through this. I've actually connected with them on social media. Of course, you have to be like very careful with
Of
who
course.
you're meeting, but I'm meeting them in these groups. So that's why I'd really recommend to anyone who doesn't know where to start. Like, even, I mean, there's even apps that do, if you don't feel comfortable going in person or you're a little embarrassed or nervous, they do these the groups for parents who are co-parenting. So I would just recommend looking that up or finding your community, because these are separate from my friends. I think it's important to have friends that, that you perhaps go to, like your church friends versus your, weekend friends, versus having this support and community that, you can make beautiful connections with people who you don't even have to like get into the details of explaining, like they just automatically, intuitively get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, and for anybody out there who's looking for like a group via social media, just be careful what the group is and try
Yes.
to understand what it literally is. And again, this, for me, I did this once innocently, not even thinking anything of it. So I go to Universal Studios Florida oftentimes, and oftentimes by myself. So I once joined a group accidentally called Single Riders of Universal Studios,
Okay.
not recognizing that it was for people who are not married and actually single that go by themselves looking for people, not people who ride the rides by themselves. So sometimes you got to dig a little deeper than the title of the group. So just be careful, guys.
Absolutely. That's a really good point for sure.
Awesome. So we are getting a little bit later in time. So before we do finish for the day, wanted to see if there's anything else you want to share or kind of get off your chest or just put out there in the universe.
Yeah, just, anyone who's going through this, or whether or not, even if it's not you going through it, you have a loved one, or, I would just say give yourself grace. It takes time. It's gonna put you on your butt some days, but that's okay. Just remember that those days don't define you, right? Those are just moments in time, and try your best to just give yourself that time to process. I think we're always just rushing so hard to like do the next thing. So just sometimes you have to be in that moment a little bit. But with that being said, making sure that you have a strong foundation, and you're gonna get through it. You're gonna get through it for you and your child.
Of course, and just be safe throughout the entire process as well.
Absolutely.
Yep. So once again, do you want to drop your social media to let everyone know where they can follow you or find you?
Yeah, that would be great. At Eyeliner and Insights. So one word, Eyeliner, AND Insights on
Awesome.
Instagram.
Very cool. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for joining. And obviously, thank you for appearing. Before I call it a day, I did want to just call out the fact that I probably will have a few more episodes the next few weeks. I know I've been trying to do 2 per month. This, I believe, is the second one for July. So first off, this week, so July 17th, will be the 2-year anniversary of this podcast, which I'm really, really excited about. So I put out 74 episodes over the course of 2 years. Initially, I aimed for 1 per week. Being a married guy with 2 kids and a full-time job, that turned out to be a little bit more than I wanted to sign up for. So I've kind of pulled it back to maybe 2 per month. We've already hit our 2 per month, but I think I'm going to do a few more this month just for fun. So I am recording the 2-year anniversary episodes probably in a week or two. Another special episode similar to last year. I'll probably put out a bonus episode also. People have asked for the theme song. I don't have a good way to get it out there, so I'll probably put up a podcast episode that's literally just the theme song. It's the best way to get it up on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. So this way, anybody who wants to get to save the episode and listen whenever they want. Also, probably going to do a watch along pretty soon of the first ever episode of a podcast that I was on. So not my first podcast, but the first one I was a guest on, which will be fun just to put it out there because that podcast doesn't exist anymore, but I kept the recording so I can put that up. Probably a few others as well. So we'll see. Follow the social media and you'll get a sense of what's going to be up and when. So with that said, social media, as mentioned before, Instagram is at Everybody Has a Story Pod. You can find the show on YouTube at Everybody Has a Story Pod. If you want to email the show directly, you can email it at everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. For all things Jeff Seltzer, you can always check me out at jeffseltzer.com. Everybodyhasastorypod.com is always a fun spot to go. Tell your friends and everybody else. We are video on Spotify and YouTube. We are audio on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Pandora. Anywhere you can find a podcast, you can probably find this one. With that said, have an amazing, amazing week. Probably see you next week, if not the week after. Take care, everyone. Peace.
Bye. Thanks, Jeff. Bye.
Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer.